Ew.
I Bought a Farm, episode 2 for 2023.
I'm going to say it's number 7 total.
7 total? Sounds right.
I think it's my guess.
Yeah, we're just kind of feathering these in as we find topics and guests that
see
make
fit.
sense. Yeah. Yeah, well, we have a regimented schedule for Hunter. Like, we can't get off that schedule. And then, I Bought a Farm is just kind of, let's talk about this, or this guy's
Whenever
coming on.
they come up, yeah.
Yeah, whenever it comes up. Sometimes we evaluate the guests. So, it is May 16th. Sometimes. Yeah. It's May 16th, and so it's kind of in a weird part of the year from a hunting standpoint and even a management standpoint. I mean, I'm taking off to go to the Kentucky farm here this afternoon to do some fertilization and stuff, but it's just, May's always one of those times I just feel like it's just dragging.
Nose to the grindstone for sure. We're just working.
That's it. So we've got a really cool guest for us today, Jeff Evans, who's the CEO of Whitetail Properties. And we've known Jeff for a while, prior to Whitetail and now obviously being agents at Whitetail. But, I think our goal for Jeff is kind of talk about state of the market a little bit, and, maybe even the progression of kind of what he's seen here the last few years to like where we are now. And where are we going? I've heard a lot of people. I've been arguing with people on Facebook on certain posts that are like, I'm just gonna wait till land comes back down to like 2,000 an acre. It's like you'll be waiting a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna do it. Doesn't mean that it's gonna skyrocket and we're gonna pay super prices like we saw in 2020, 21, 22, even early 22. But it's surely not gonna fall back to $2,000 an acre in most places.
Well, I mean, just the reality is there's a lot of different markets within the real estate market,
Mm-hmm.
and real estate industry, I should say. And I think, like, at least in the short time that we've been doing it, relative, it seems like people have like less of a grasp on what's really happening with those markets, maybe than ever before.
Yeah,
and like so that manifests itself in a sense where. Within a certain market, let's call it, the recreational market, which I don't necessarily think is the case, but just for the sake of getting it out here,
Mm-hmm.
I think that like a lot of sellers, like maybe 80-90% of the sellers think that their land is worth more than it is.
Absolutely.
Again, not necessarily the recreational market, but
Mm-hmm.
just saying real estate in
Mm-hmm.
general. And on the flip side, 80-90% of your buyers think that I would never pay that.
Mm-hmm.
It's out of.
Seems like we're
it's out of the
two
question.
very opposite ends of the polar spectrum right now.
Polar opposites. And there are deals happening. I mean, obviously, we're selling properties here in the meantime with those 15-20% of people who, we can bring to terms.
Good property, priced right, and buyers ready to go.
Yeah. But it's tough, and money's expensive in the meantime, so you've got a limited buyer pool to work with.
And normally those cash buyers are wanting a deal because it's cash buyers. They're not financing things.
Because of the inventory level right now and the limited buyer pool, it's like we're kind of seeing some cash buyers name their price.
Mm-hmm. This is a complete turnaround in the last 12 to 24 months. I mean, before it wasn't a limited amount of buyers. It was a limited amount of inventory for sellers, properties on the market. When they hit the market, there were multiple buyers going after them.
Yeah.
And we've quickly come out of that realm.
And also, Jeremy and I's perspective is here in Pennsylvania,
sure.
In the northeast part of the country, the southwest part of Pennsylvania, where recreational markets aren't necessarily like, the primary market drivers as much as
build lots.
Yeah. Buildings, development, oil and gas, is kind of what we see here. But I think Jeff will be able to give us a really good perspective, like company-wide from Whitetail Properties, as well as, everybody who operates in this space. Whitetail Properties is in, I think, 39 states, and we've got 350 or so agents.
Yep.
I'm going to say 11 or 12 of which are right here in Pennsylvania. And, there's probably some micro environments in every single agent's territory. And so, it'd be fun to kind of hash that out with Jeff. So
I think there's some interesting things too. Jeff obviously having kind of that larger view on the country in terms of the real estate market and the land market. Even just us kind of looking around, obviously we have property in Ohio and Kentucky, but looking around in some of these other states, Illinois, for example, it's so hard for me to believe that somebody can acquire tillable land at, let's say, $10,000 an acre and then per some of the recent podcasts that we've done, understanding the economics behind it, like make money. Like it just seems so hard to kind of put those two together. And obviously there are a lot of different things. We've talked to Dan Perez in the past about leveraging self-directed 401ks and things like that, or people floating 1031 exchange money. So they are paying in all cash. So any income coming in is a positive, right? Where I would say the majority of people listening to this are thinking, well, if I have to finance it and have a mortgage, there's no way like that the cash run's going to bring in enough money there. So it's having that broader understanding here that we'll get in with Jeff on the buyer pool and the sellers and even just differences across the country.
And that probably is the case. I mean, in fairness, and Jeff can tell us we're wrong, but we've had enough conversations and experiences personally with buying and selling land that, like, if you're going to buy something from a recreational standpoint, like purely, and expect it to cash flow, it's kind of a unicorn.
It's tough.
It's kind of a unicorn. There has to be some major overlooked element of value, like as you're finding out here, timber. Is one potential, depending on the amount of timber and and there's
and even that won't cash flow it for 20 years, right? But it may
cover your down payment.
It'll get me to where I need to be, for a 3 or 4 year and then a sell.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the ins and outs, the things like, tillable cash rent. The big thing that I've looked at a lot, and I don't want to do it, but is having a house on it that you're renting out there, but then you become a landlord. It is the natural resource aspect is very. I mean, the trifecta is if you have some tillable, but you can harvest timber and you've also got oil and gas on it, you're probably making income on it.
Sure. Well, there's those unexpected elements of value. People aren't going to just up and give them to you for, you gotta stumble into them almost. But
let's get Jeff in and go to work. All right, Jeff, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you, fellas, and looking forward to talking to you. Thanks for the invite.
Well, Jeff, we Jared and I have talked about this for a while, and we knew we wanted to get you on the podcast, and it, we're kind of in this weird changing, transition in the land market. It seems like here for the last 6 to 8 months, and you were trying to time it to where, frankly, Jared and I had a little bit more personal experience on the real estate side, to bring maybe a little bit more conversation to the experience that you're bringing to this podcast. But I guess, first of all, for some of the listeners, obviously we kind of pre-introed you as CEO here at Whitetail Properties, but maybe give us a little background on kind of your journey to where you're at right now.
Sure. I don't know how far back you want me to start, but I'm a West Central Illinois boy, born and raised, small town America here in Pittsfield, where our home office is, and for me it was always about. I knew I wanted to do something in the outdoor industry. I wasn't sure what it like you guys and a lot of the listeners on here, figuring out that path was. What was really kind of what I was interested in. So, went to college and worked in a family business and, enjoyed working with family, but I always had a passion for land. I always had a passion for the outdoors. I always had a passion for hunting and, kind of one of those right place at the right time. I'd gotten a real estate license. Oh gosh, probably back in about 2003, somewhere in there. Not really sure what I wanted to do with it at the time, but fortunately, knew Dan Perez, knew a couple of the other principal partners here. Pete Alfano had been kind of childhood friends with him, and so when they had came to me and said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this television, real estate concept." I mean, I knew it was something that I had to be a part of. So, I was very fortunate when we started Whitetail. I was, basically employee number one back at the end of I joined here at the end of 2007. So, going on, I guess, fast forwarding a little bit, 15, 16 years later, started, I was an agent, managed a territory, sold land, worked directly with buyers and sellers. But also at that same time, was really doing a lot inside the business just to kind of help us get going. And I was working on the website, loading listings, helping new agents with contracts, and just helping them learn the business, kind of simultaneously as I was learning the business as well. So as the business progressed, I just was very fortunate to be able to just kind of move along with the business, and worked under Dan Perez for those 15 years, and when he decided that it was time for him to kind of enjoy the fruits of his labor and step away from the day-to-day operation of the business, I was just really in a good spot where I'd understood just a lot of the growth of the business, where the partner's vision to take it, and what what we were trying to do here, match buyers and sellers, and help people fulfill their dreams. And so it's I kind of have to pinch myself every day for getting to be in the position that I am, work with great people. You guys are agents from across the country. I mean, just a really special company, a special culture. Just really, really proud to be a part of it. So that's kind of in a nutshell the last 15, 16 years of my life. So.
And Jeff, when you kind of think back to that 2007 timeframe, and kind of the advent of coming into this land market, and then look at us today. I think Jared said it pre-podcast. We're at what, 350 agents or so, ballpark.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, first of all, like, amazing to see that kind of transition here over the last like 16 years. But as you guys kind of looked at that marketplace, I would assume that a lot of your mindset originally was, fairly local, right? I mean, looking at that Illinois, Missouri, maybe Iowa land markets to say, can we make a business at this in these areas?
Yeah, for sure. When you even peel it back a little further, like, I'm 42, so I graduated high school in 1998. And, the internet was really, I mean, a handful of years old at that time, So when you think about how we market properties and how we marketed them when we started, right? I mean, it was the traditional stuff. It was newspaper ads. It was those kind of things. And as we've seen technology, and I mean, you guys are a perfect example of that. I mean, as you've just seen technology advance an industry so much, it's just wild in the last 15 years how much that's happened. But you're exactly right. I think when the business started, it was very, I think the concept was very regionalized, right? I mean, we were a Midwest company, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Kentucky, we were, that was one of our early states as well. I think that was really where the focus was, because that's what we knew as a team. We were most familiar with the Midwest, and so, but as we watched the model grow and the concept grow, you quickly realize that there's opportunities everywhere. And as we marched across the country, from coast to coast, north to south, where you guys are in PA is a prime example. There was always an opportunity there, but it just kind of took us growing into it and finding great opportunities. Whether it was finding the right person who said, "Hey, I'm here in PA, or I'm here in Ohio, or I'm here in Tennessee. I'd love to join your company." And then that just through that natural progression, then you think, "Hey, why don't we go there? Because there's probably a great opportunity there." So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not just even geographically, but like we were talking pre-podcast about like and Jeff, maybe you have a better way to say this. It's just, Jeremy and I BSing beforehand is like, we have like essentially sub markets like within the real estate industry. And so like Whitetail Properties started, like you said, in those 3 or 4 core states. And I would assume that was based on almost exclusively like recreational markets. It's Whitetail Properties, we sell farms where you can, hunting farms, recreational farms.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly, especially, as far northeast as Jeremy and I are, we're in almost a completely different subset of markets within the real estate industry. Can you describe kind of the progression, maybe at a macro scale that like Whitetail Properties has experienced, from those 3 or 4 initial states to submarkets across 39 states?
100%, man. You're exactly right. So I think, you just think about the name, right? And so everything was purely recreational driven when we started. And I guess through that progression, I would ask myself the question, like, what I want to own isn't necessarily what everybody else wants to own, right? Meaning, people buy land for all different reasons, and they may be hunters, they may not be. It may be about having a place for their kids to go. It may be about a place to ride four wheelers. It may just be about a place to go, right? A place to call your own. And so what we learned was, yes, there are those microcosms, those micro markets all across the country where people buy land for different reasons. There's different opportunities. There's things draw people to different places, and so
Almost hard to imagine at first, right, Jeff? It's like, what else is there?
Yeah.
100%, right? I mean, yeah, you think, why would somebody want to own land, in West Virginia? Why would somebody want to
Oh,
own?
house. What do you mean? I'm going to deer hunt here.
Yeah, that's right. And so, yeah, I think it was just about realizing that people buy land for all different purposes, and man, land's amazing no matter where you go, right? I mean, I get the privilege of, you see listings and you see stuff on social media that our agents post all over the country, and you think, man, I would love to own something there, so it's pretty cool. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that, even to that point, you've got kind of the investor side of it. You've got kind of the person who's just looking for their own passion farm, or potentially their house, or where they're going to build their home site on. I think when you start to look at the diversity of land, and then you kind of overlay that with the geography aspect of it, right? I mean, Jared and I, if we sell a piece of ground that's close to Pittsburgh versus something that's more in the rural western side of Pennsylvania, you see a huge discrepancy in obviously price per acre because of the demand, because of the area. I think where a lot of people listening to this are probably not frustrated, but just maybe even, confused is, they came into a time frame of COVID where, maybe prior to COVID, they're like, I need to buy a farm. I'm not sure if the right time is, what should I do? Then all of a sudden COVID comes and, flips our world upside down to, the point for a lot of us. I mean, a piece of ground, a farm hits the market, and I mean, it's like piranhas after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a buyer frenzy on a listing. And now we kind of are coming back out of that to where people are starting to see more inventory, and buyers, because of interest rates and things like that,
Mainly
are
because of interest
yeah,
rates.
are becoming a little bit thinner. And so I think, where a lot of people listening to this, Jeff, are, it seems like prices have remained fairly stable. Whereas, we hear on the news about housing markets and stuff, and it's the up and the down and the fluctuations and the bottom falling out. We just don't see that with land.
Yeah, I agree. If I went back, let's say, to kind of when Whitetail started, and I don't want to overgeneralize it, but just to kind of conceptualize the cycles of the market, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think about when prior to 2008. The market was very hot, right? There was,
Yep.
I mean, and I'm talking about regionally here now, kind of in the Midwest. And then all of a sudden, 2008 hit. The financial crisis, the auto bailout, all those things, the housing crisis. All those things happened, and there was, it put the brakes on. Especially a lot of the recreational stuff. I mean, discretionary income. All that stuff kind of took a back seat, there for probably 3 or 4 years when we started to really get going. So what was our real learning experience, I think, for us was looking back, starting in one of those, what I'd call, just a really tough market. And so we spent probably, really the last pre-COVID, you spent a good 7-8 years where the market was just really building steam, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you went from, during that financial crisis where, it was a buyer's market, right? I mean, things sat on the market, things got stagnant, prices started to go down, and buyers could really pick and choose and could really kind of name their price. And as we saw that market over that period change, and then COVID happened. Right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it went from, there was no inventory and everybody wanted to buy something. So you saw this other extreme in a lot what you guys are talking about there. So in the last, 24 months, 24 months, you've really seen this inventory starved market, right? Where sellers could name a price. There was 3 people to buy every piece of property that came on the market. And I think now you're just seeing a little bit of that, to a much softer degree, a little bit of a change, as we kind of come out of that COVID frenzy. To your guys' point, rates go up. there's a lot of money back in paper money, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
CDs and money markets and things like that are more attractive now than they've ever been. But what I will say is that it still does seem like it's a fairly inventory starved market, right? So I still think that's driving quite a bit of the demand still, even if there are these other things out there in the market that should, put the brakes on it just a little bit,
Yeah. And
So
I think we see that too. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit there earlier, but if Jared and I get a listing and the seller is realistic about what their property's worth and it's a good piece of ground and we get it on the market, there are buyers waiting there with open arms
100%.
to see that. And we've got a couple of those. What seems to be the challenge for a lot of people, and we kind of have a pathway as Whitetail to be able to talk to the sellers and be able to really, be transparent with them about why we're pricing their property or saying that their property is worth one thing when they may see another. But you're starting to see maybe more non-land specialty type agencies out there selling land. And for a lot of these agents, and I've talked to them, it's the biggest transaction that they'll make in their entire real estate career, right?
Yeah.
If they grab this 200 acre, this 400 acre, and often with that comes almost a price where it's like, where did that even come from? Where are they getting that number from?
Yeah.
And I think some of that is still feeding off of this COVID frenzy, right? Where they saw land just being put out there for almost whatever price, and people were buying it, and now they're throwing it back out there.
I think that almost it seems to come more so into Jeff, like a little bit of background about our region here. So 6 southwesternmost counties in Pennsylvania. So we have like Pittsburgh would be like the biggest. We have Butler and some areas up north, but we have some remote areas as well. And so like a really diverse territory in terms of
farm ground to city to woodlands.
Yeah, I mean,
basically Appalachia.
There's a few areas, where stuff is going for $50,000-$100,000 an acre close to the city in those high end areas. Not farm ground pricing, but that's somebody's going to build a large custom home like King of the Castle type stuff.
Right.
And so because of that, it's a very like broker rich environment. I mean, we've got Pyatt Sotheby's, Century 21, Howard Hanna, run down the Berkshire Hathaway's, huge in some areas out here. And so there's literally thousands of agents, who have been transacting homes across our agent for years before Jeremy and I have ever gotten here. Which I think says a lot about, the market share that we've gained, like within the first 2 years. I think, if we're pretty proud of that, you know, and that's because of the knowledge that we brought in and the focus that we put on land.
Yes.
But there's kind of a middle ground, like where it's not a clash necessarily, but like the phenomenon that Jeremy's describing is like we see all these residential agents, I think, starting to see some success on our end, or there's so much business to be had, and they've got previous business clients that they just pick that up from. They're like, oh, I also have this 60 acre, I also have this 180 acres, Pyatt Sotheby's is going to list it for me. And like, it seems like that mentality that we had on homes, as far as like, throw whatever price you want on it from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, somebody will pay it. Like that's what Jeremy's saying is, dude, we see, raw land properties hit the market on a daily basis that like, I know for a fact nobody will ever pay. Mm-hmm. And when they do sell, it ends up being for two thirds of that price.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's what I would have told them initially, mm-hmm. And instead they just got the runaround, and that broker probably just, beat them up over time to say, hey, like nobody's calling. And it's like, yeah. That's the reality.
Yeah, that's right. They basically you kind of tie the listing up and you wait out the opportunity almost, is what happens. I think what, you've seen this kind of this rural homes, rural living, real explosion that I think was initially has been very COVID fueled. I mean, people realize, hey, I don't have to be sitting in an office anymore. All this remote work, people said, hey, I can do my job from anywhere. Why don't I go and buy what I can afford, buy something in the country, and I can do my job just as effectively. And I think what we've seen with the transition of these historically or traditional residential or commercial brokers is, obviously those industries are experiencing I would call it a decline right now, especially the commercial brokerage industry, right? I mean, commercial property, those values and things like around those Pittsburghs and things like that. I mean, I think those brokers are probably just looking for another avenue to say, how can I leverage my relationships? Where's the money? Where's the money to be made right now in the real estate industry, right? And it's no doubt it's in the land business, to some degree, So, yeah, I think you guys are exactly right.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we've lost listing deals, and where I want to tie this back into is, you know, I I think because Whitetail was the first, oftentimes we take, quote, the blame, or we get the blame for soaring land prices, right? I hear that all the time of like, man, as soon as, Whitetail came in and like land prices, and like in the same vein of kind of these other things, somebody will say, well, what about, like, why is this property listed so high? I'd have no idea. Like, it's not,
Well, if I can play like devil's advocate on it, I don't think that happens as much where we're at as I do. Like,
I guess I'm saying that as a whole in terms of,
sure.
recreational land,
Well,
especially.
and the reality is that, like, hunting for a while, like, I know pre Whitetail Properties was probably, and even in some areas today, I mean, it's very rare, but like an unrealized element of value. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people that own quality hunting ground, maybe don't necessarily realize that that could be the thing that people will pay the most for.
Yeah.
And so, like, if anybody's going to point fingers at a whitetail property, at anybody who promotes hunting properties, it's for realizing that element of value and,
Mm-hmm.
essentially capitalizing on it.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
that is business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it kind of came back in, is that, that was it. It was like, hey, there's a value. And I don't know, if it didn't exist in the buyer pool before, it's just we kind of brought it out a little bit more, to the forefront of it. But I do think, if you look at a lot of the things that we do and we price, and again, not picking on any particular other agency out there, but you see what some of these people that maybe are less knowledgeable in that space, their pricing is not necessarily accurate compared to what we're putting out there, because we're using the knowledge on the different comparables out there to bring
Well,
that to
what's
the
happening
table.
is those
Yeah.
sellers are getting national exposure on their recreational properties that didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, it was just, so and so from town, like to hunt, and they would buy it for whatever a local market price would be.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's you're putting a national spotlight on, the seller's piece of property that people are willing to pay big money for, and that's,
Mm-hmm.
a huge advantage to the seller. I mean, people are getting more money for their properties than ever before.
Yeah. So Jeff, when you guys started out regionally, kind of at the beginning there, obviously, a lot of these things didn't happen. TV show was one of the things right out of the gate that kind of came to fruition, But again, looking at that market in Kentucky, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, obviously a lot of non-residents looking to hunt there, looking to own land in those places. What were some of the things that, out of the gate you guys used to kind of continue to build that national exposure for some of those properties?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the television show. I mean, I feel like we were really the pioneers of that movement, right? Of utilizing a television show to promote land, right? To promote recreation. You think about the hunting industry prior to that. It was VHS tapes, right? And it
Yeah.
was it was a lot of just word of mouth. I mean, people would go to shows, and you would hear about that type of thing. So I think the television show was a huge competitive advantage for us to kind of jump out in front of that space and really expose the recreational opportunities of land. Right? I mean, everybody has always known about land, but really, to your point, how do you reach the people who want to come here?
Right.
How do you reach the guys in the sportsmen, I should say, in the Northeast, the sportsmen in the South who were coming here, but really, I mean, they were coming here just purely based on a relationship. They got to know somebody. So through the television show, I mean, obviously when the internet came out, social media started to be a really a real game changer in terms of exposing the land market, the recreational market to hunters across the country. So yeah, I think all those things were really we were on the front end of being able to help, to your point, help sellers get the most eyeballs in front of their property, right? To demand the highest price to create an environment of competition. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really what it was all about,
I
So
kind of relate it to like back, we talked about this before, but back in the day when, prior to social media and everything, let's say somebody killed a giant buck in Iowa, unless you got like the Game and Fish magazine or like you didn't even know it happened. Like
that's
if you were states over, you had no idea that that guy even killed a deer or he went to a show or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden, and now with the way that we have all this technology and social media, it's like, you know what half the deer killed in a county, 7 states away just because of cruising
yeah.
through social media or forums and stuff.
Yeah,
So
to your point, the Game and Fish, the North American whitetails,
yeah,
yeah, that was the
that was
conduit
it.
to honor. Yeah, you're
That
right.
was it. It was like, oh my, like these deer exist. For us in Pennsylvania, you open it up and you look at these deer that are getting killed in Illinois and Iowa, and you're like, oh my God, like deer like this actually exist out there.
Yeah,
It just seems so far fetched. And I think it was kind of similar, like these people who had a super passion and maybe they were successful at business in these other states, like, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Michigan, big, deep hunting roots. All of a sudden it's like, wow, like what if you own land in Missouri or Iowa or Illinois? And it was just like a whole different world that like didn't exist, or wasn't fathomable for us for so long.
yeah, that's right. I can remember, wearing out almost to, watching it so many times, Primos videos and Real Tree
Yeah.
Monster Bucks. You just rewatch those over and over and over. Yeah, it's
That's it,
awesome.
man. Yeah, it's one of those things that I think that, maybe people take for granted because I mean, I do it probably more often than my wife would like, but I sit there on whether it's Land Watch or our site or whatever, and I'll pick like Illinois. Okay, I'd love to own a farm in Illinois, and I'm just sitting there just flipping. I mean, I can flip through 500 properties in 40 minutes.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, that's all what the inventory is. Like, that's it.
yeah,
Or an alert, I get an alert, up new property listed in that state or whatever. It's so crazy. And so I think why I say that is because people often just, in conversation are like, oh, but land's expensive. It's like, think of how fast, 100,000 people know that that piece of ground just hit the market.
hmm
I mean,
yeah,
it's inevitable to create bigger demand and drive prices up. And it's not the agency, it's not the necessarily the way that things are done. It's because the speed at which these buyers are getting that and the way that the demand is built so fast.
Well, it's not just the recreational market either. I
No,
mean,
it's
it's
everything.
just the world is
that's
getting
the world,
Yeah.
100%.
yeah. I mean, like with social media, knowing about what deer get killed,
Mhm.
with different mapping softwares, being able to scout everything,
Yeah.
remotely, all the way down to these properties being for sale. It's just like it's kind of a blessing and a curse, is because like, man, all those tools are so great. All of everything that we do with connecting buyers and sellers, I think is a good thing. But just like the reality is that they really aren't making any more of it. Like, and
Yeah,
there's nothing you can do to slow it
No.
down. Like,
yeah.
No.
other than buy it.
I know. Yeah.
You guys are right when you think about just the availability of information. I don't care what it is, right? And you think about the equipment we use in hunting. I mean, think about when if you wanted to know what the wind direction was, in
Yeah.
1995, you had to wait for the 6 or 10 o'clock
I know.
news, right? Now
Exactly.
it's on your phone at any given second. I mean,
Yeah.
and it'll give you the barometer and the temperature, and I mean, it's wild when you think about how far it's
Yeah.
come.
I mean, it's crazy when you look at that side. And, I think that a lot of people, the question we hear all the time, especially from people looking for recreational land and stuff, they're like, "How, I want to get a deal." Like that just seems like the thing that, and, and I get that, especially from an investment side and stuff. But, to your point, they're not making any more of this stuff. In fact, if anything, the farms are getting smaller, they're getting broken up, or they're subdividing out here and there. And so, the thing that I kind of always tell people is I'm like, listen, the only way you're going to slow this process down is to get into it, right? I mean, you got to jump in at some point. If you're just going to keep waiting and waiting and waiting, the prices aren't going to get any better and the land isn't going to get more available.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
It's
exactly right.
It's the fear of jumping in. I know is why people don't do it. It's not because, well, maybe they just haven't found the right one necessarily. But to your point, yeah, if you don't get in, you won't ever get started. But I think it's just, fear of from a recreational property standpoint. It's like it's not understanding the finances. Like how much am I going to have to bring to the table? How much am I going to have to come up with, per month to be able to afford this place? From
Yeah.
there, what can I use to help me, pay my taxes on this place? And you kind of grow, you grow it from there. But I mean, I think that's what keeps people out of it. It's just fear of competition, fear of, lack of understanding of the finances. And
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, it's a risk. I mean, most people they're gonna get out of their comfort zone to step out there and take hard-earned money, maybe that they've saved, and put it down. And take a risk on something. I mean, to your point, I think that's a huge barrier of entry for most people. They don't understand the financing, or quite honestly, they own a home and they think, I don't know as to I can ever do this, right? And so yeah, I think that's educating yourself and to what we're talking about, the resources out there, our agents across the country. What better resources are there to help you find a lender, understand how the banking for raw land works. I mean, all those things, that's just part of the process, that I think most people, they don't spend enough time understanding to really put themselves in a great position to be able to pull the trigger at some point.
Yeah.
I think it's like, to your point, Jeff, if you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing when it comes to like a land transaction, I would argue that it's not necessarily like a risk as much as it is an opportunity cost.
Sure.
It's an investment. Any way you spend it, it's an investment. And so it's just, what would I have done with that money otherwise is really the only, I'm going to call it an opportunity cost more than a risk.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, to that point, I think people, they definitely they overanalyze a lot of things. You got to be hesitant because for most of these people, if they're buying recreational land, especially, it's not for their primary residence, right? It's a secondary investment property. It's something that they're going to enjoy from a hunting recreational standpoint. But you talk to a lot of people right now. There's a lot of people kicking themselves that they didn't get in the game, 12 months ago, 8 months ago, when interest rates were at 3%. Now look where they're at, and they're like, man,
I'm kind of one of them. I mean,
Yeah.
not that I necessarily was like ready at that time, but yeah, certainly
it's the ever-changing game that you're trying to, I think, to your point, tying yourself to somebody that understands what's happening or what could happen here in the future is super critical as a buyer, especially because if you're trying to navigate it by yourself, I mean, it's tough. There's a
Yeah.
lot of moving pieces. It's not your first thing that you're probably married to. You've got work, family, everything else. So
well,
finding somebody
there's buyers out there. I mean, if you're in a buyer pool, there's buyers out there that know what they're doing too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you're just stepping in. It can be kind of scary to watch everybody circling around the ring at 100 miles an hour, and you're like,
because they've been doing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we always joke and call, you talking about, the shoulda, woulda, coulda club, like I should have bought land back when I should have done this, and I mean, that is a feeling that I think all of us have at one point or another. If you haven't, you will, as you watch markets, fluctuate, right? But in my experience, if you watch a market go down, it seems like it always ends up coming back stronger, whether that's a year later, 5 years later, whenever that is, So like when I think about, and I used the word risk earlier, and I think you characterized that correctly, where there's just a fear of that unknown. But in my experience, it just seems like when you talk about just a sustainable, consistent, investment, it always seems to end up, better than it was, so
I think that's like, if you can understand that, like the cyclical nature of interest rates, especially, of like a lot of people right now are refraining from buying because of these high interest rates, and understandably, they're like, I don't want to overpay for a piece of property.
yeah.
But I think like right now could be a really good time to buy if you can find one of these sellers who needs to sell or really wants to sell in this market, especially if you can strike something like a land contract, an owner financing deal. If you can get the right price for the property, like I think you should be okay with starting with a higher interest rate.
It's going to be temporary, right? I mean,
knowing that you can refinance.
Yeah, we know it's going to come back. You're going to eat it. I mean, number one, for sure, don't pass up the property, right? If you've been waiting and you see, your property, because with these higher interest rates, and coming out of COVID, we're also seeing some more inventory come available. So the chance of the farm that you've been waiting for to come out is maybe more likely than it was 2 years ago. And so if the farm comes on the market, if you're worried about interest rates, you're probably not ready to buy a farm.
Yeah.
That's the way I would look at it. If it's the farm that comes out.
Yeah.
And it's just because, I kind of ask myself that on a personal investment side all the time. It's like, if it's a farm that I truly believe is going to be a great benefit to myself and my family from, not only a recreational side, but from an investment side, I'm going to pounce it, and, I'll make sure that I can make my payments, but I'm obviously thinking about how I'm going to make my money back, if I can refinance, all the factors that will come down the road. You have to be aware of them, but you can't sit on the sideline and let that come by, because it may never come back in your lifetime.
Yeah.
The way land is.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of, obviously it's a very emotional subject, right? Especially when you're talking about a farm next to, where you've hunted, or next to a piece that you own. People will generally, human nature is, I'll step out a little further for something that means something to me, right? Or means a little bit more. But I think you're right. I think when you look at historically at interest rates, I think we all got a little used to 2 and 3% interest, which
Right.
when you look back over the course of time is almost, it's just, it's never happened before,
Right.
So, rates are very similar to where they were when we started back in 7 and 8, 9. It just gets down to penciling some of those things out. Obviously the debt service looks a little different, right, than it does at 2 or 3% interest. But the biggest challenge that I've seen with most buyers, and you guys have probably experienced that, is that down payment. Most people can make a payment, right? We're accustomed to payments. We budget, and you work, you work your life around payments, right? Car payments, house payments, mortgage payments. But I think that if there's one piece of advice for people that I would give, it would be, man, if you're working towards buying something, is that down payment is a really big deal, and if you have to live below your means, or sell something, or liquidate something, or alternate your lifestyle a little bit, if buying something is that important to you, which for a lot of us it is, it's just, you're just going to have to change up what you're doing a little bit in times like these, and I agree with you. I think we're going to see these rates come back. Is it going to be 6, 8, 12 months from now? Maybe not, but is it going to be 24 months from now? It sure could be. And I think anything you can do to put yourself in that position when the time's right is something that I would be encouraging everybody to do, for sure.
Well, and there's a lot of, and I'm working, I know we have relationships with some lenders. I'm actually doing a refinance on one of the properties I just bought with the Rural First Group. And so I'd bought that through a different lender, mainly because I had other properties under it. So I leveraged those properties for my down payment. We'll talk about that later. But I bought it. Frankly, it was one of those ones where it came across my desk and I'm like, oh, this is one I've been looking for. And at the time, interest rates were like 8.7, 8.8.
Yep.
And so it was like, do I go for this thing and lock it down and then, hopefully can refinance later, or do I let it slide by? And I jumped on it right away. Right. And I ended up
still hoping for that refinance.
I'm in it now. So that was what I was going to say, is, so I bought that. And Jeff, one thing you'll find out at least on our podcast for stuff, like, I'm super transparent with my number stuff. So I bought that. I closed on that in January of 22. So just this past January 22. So I guess a year ago. I think I was 8.75 was the interest rate that I locked in. Right. So just last month, and I'm finalizing it this month, I went to Rural First, and I'm going to knock that down to 6.25.
Oh yeah.
So, I'm knocking 2.5 points off in a year. Right. And it's just, play the market and timing, shop it around,
That's right.
and so
that's the advantage of a portfolio lender too.
Oh, huge. Right. And frankly, I went to my portfolio lender first and was kind of like, hey, I've got a lot of properties with you guys. I do a lot of business with you all. I gotta, like, I want to get this down. Like, I needed to get this property. I wanted to lock. It was a great investment for me, but I want to knock this down as interest rates fall. Frankly, the best they could get me was like 7.7. And so immediately it was like, well, I got to shop this thing around. If I'm going to have to I was trying to build a portfolio with one lender so I had more equity to leverage on future purchases. But ultimately, if I looked at the numbers, it was like, man, if these guys are going to take me to 6.25, right, I might as well start building a portfolio over there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it happens fast, I guess.
To your point, I think being able to build a relationship with a lender who understands raw land, and probably even maybe even more importantly is probably in the area that you're looking to buy. They understand the markets. They're comfortable. They have a high level of comfortability. I mean, if you're in PA and you're thinking about buying something in Indiana, your local the local bank that has your home mortgage or Wells Fargo or maybe it's some big regional bank, they may not be comfortable doing that, right? And so to your guys' point, finding a great agent that you can rely on who has those relationships that they can help you start building a relationship with somebody local. So when the rates do change or that property does come up, man, you're in a great position to jump on it. Maybe you're even pre-approved, right? I mean, you're just there waiting on the right one to come down the pipe. So
honestly, out here, I mean, there's not a lot of options, right? Because like there's not a whole lot of vacant land. Most lenders out here are used to dealing with like residential brokerages and stuff, and so I mean, there's a handful of like small independent lenders and stuff
in Pennsylvania.
In Pennsylvania,
as soon as we go into Ohio and Kentucky, it kind of opens up a lot more.
Right. But right here, I mean, it's Ag Choice Farm Credit is kind of your option.
Yep.
And you're basically looking at 20% down, and I think right now like 7.5% is kind of.
That's
you
where
said
we were.
799, but that's.
That was about a month or two ago when I got that quote, so it's changed a little bit, but nowhere near the 6.25 that Rural First can get me.
I would say 80% of my buyers that are buying vacant land in southwestern Pennsylvania have used Ag
Farm
Choice
Credit.
Farm Credit.
Yep,
they're just the most likely.
That's where my other farms are with.
Yeah, I know.
My entire portfolio. Yeah, and I think Jeff, to your point, when you talk about agents, and I've had good relationships with our agents here at Horizon Farm Credit. And I've started to make more relationships with the Rural First. We had Emily Stamper on. I actually had a property line issue with the PVA office. I literally sent it to her. She drove it down there and gave it to the clerk, like handed it to her as part of this. Like, I was like nobody does that.
Service.
Yeah, that's right. That's service there. Yeah.
You just got served.
Yeah, exactly. But to your point, Jeff, I mean that she lives right where my farm is, right? So I mean, she understands. She knows the people. She understands it. She understands the values.
For years.
She's probably she's probably hunting it right now, And so yeah, I mean, it starts to make sense, and I think oftentimes, especially in the financial sector, for a lot of us, to your point about kind of our home lender, we get comfortable with our local banks. I mean, I'm banking with the same company I probably opened my first bank account with when I was 11 years old or whatever, and so sometimes it's going to take getting kind of forced outside of your comfort zone to find what is actually going to be best for you in a purchase like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, most people want to paint that with a broad brush that, buying a farm's like buying a home. And, quite honestly, they couldn't probably be further from a different experience, and, you talked a lot about home ownership and, getting creative with, lines of credit or home equity loans or, equity in other properties or things like that, where, I think, you mentioned with Dan talking about 401ks and self-directed IRAs. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of getting creative where somebody may think, man, I don't have this big wad of money to put down. But in reality, if they would talk through that with an agent or, with somebody in the financial world, man, they may have more options than they think, I guess is what I'm getting at, just sitting down and getting creative about how can I do this? So.
Yeah. I think the home equity line of credit is probably the most available option for a lot of these buyers, but it's also the biggest fear, right? Because the moment you do that, right, now literally the roof over your head is in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I say that even personally, every time I look at a farm, if I have a lot of equity in my primary
you don't
residence.
Have a home equity line of credit,
I don't. I've not dipped into it. I'm not saying I won't, but I'm just saying I haven't dipped into it yet. But a lot of that is because I have those conversations with my wife, and she's like, the moment you go into that, now it is the roof over, mine and the kid's head as well. And so I get that.
So, and I guess for people that maybe don't understand, is like you're collateralizing your house, to take the
Correct.
equity out of it, you know, in a liquid form.
That's your down payment. To what Jeff was saying is like, where am I going to get this down payment? You're going to get it from a home equity line of credit. And it's because most people, that is the largest asset that they will ever have, right? Is their home. They work every day to pay their mortgage, which is the equity they're building in the largest asset they'll ever have.
If you have the choice, you want to collateralize, a non-primary residence as your first option.
Sure.
If you have multiple, and if you have multiple farms, you know this already, but you want to lean against one farm to buy the next, not necessarily your house to buy the first. That's the riskiest.
Yeah, and it's how do you get in the game though?
But you can. I mean, dude, if you need $50,000 for a down payment and you've got, more than that in equity in your home, and you can, foreseeably make the payments, then why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little personal experience of that was, I was always a saver, I guess. I'm just conservative by nature. And I bought the first piece of property that I owned. I bought when I was 23. I just graduated from college, and so I had a little bit of money. Obviously, prices were different back then, so it wasn't quite the same price per acre, but so I had the down payment for that piece of property, and so the next piece, like happens so often, I had 80 acres that came up that bordered mine. So at the time, I probably wasn't in the best financial position to pull the trigger on that. But you said earlier, I didn't know if that was ever going to be available again, right? And so I thought, my gosh, I really need to figure out a way to do this. So, that was 4 or 5 years later. So I had built back up a little bit of cash, but I didn't really want to go and just kind of drop all that again, on another down payment. So I had put myself in a little bit different position where I was able to what you just said, to take some equity out of that property and put down on as my down payment, for that next farm. And I probably would never have been able to do that had I not put myself in that position on that first piece of property. So getting that first one paid for it's a real key. If you can.
If you come from like a renting mentality, or especially people my age and younger than me, they're used to making rent payments, and it's just cash out the door. You're never going to see that again.
There's
the reality of purchasing an asset, and in this case land, is I'm making investments up front, maybe as much as 20%, and then on a monthly basis paying into that principal balance that at some point I can pull out in liquid form to put into another purchase. I can keep rolling the stone down the road. And I think once you start to realize that, you're I should have started 10 years ago. I invested in my first piece. I could have been saving that money I was spending on rent or whatever to do this.
Well, I think a lot of people are still functioning off of, and again, no knock to them, but maybe this is the local, regional bank telling you about your savings account, or maybe it's your 401k. But, people will tell you, well, land like that, it's not liquid. Well, yeah, it's not liquid cash, but the ability to leverage that asset, right, in that equity in today's society is pretty freaking easy. Even if you had to, let's say you actually had to dump that land, like, oh man, I really need to sell it. You put it out there for what it's worth. You're probably going to sell it pretty quick in the market. It's just, it's kind of when you get into this, traditional finance side of things, and trying to do
Jeff's
that.
Comment, dude, the traditional stance is safe.
Yes.
And I think in this market, especially like a high inflation situation like we're in now, people are realizing, even though I've saved all this money, it's worth less than it ever was before.
Yeah.
So it's I kind of have just a few options. I can leave my money in the bank and have it lose value by the day.
Yeah.
I can invest it in paper funds, and that there's an opportunity.
Yeah, I
there.
mean, like Jeff said, CDs, money markets, things like that are at their best return that they probably have been in a long time, if
or
not
you
ever.
can invest it in hard assets, land, being one that you can enjoy while owning.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to. We always talk about it's hard to enjoy a CD. I mean,
that's
like
it, man.
what's the So
well, I think the big thing that we hear, and I know Jared and I talk about this all the time, is like, okay, let's say I've got a down payment, I buy the land. In a sense, I can make my monthly mortgage payments, right? I can cash flow this thing. the end point, though, especially if it's not just the one farm that you're always going to have, is if it's an investment, is, how do I make money on these things? And oftentimes, we catch ourselves even relating us to, where you guys are at, Jeff, in Illinois and Iowa, and it's like, $250 per acre cash rents. Like, we don't see that out here.
Sure.
Jared, your farm's getting what, 75,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
75 an acre. So it's so hard to think of, like, okay, if I have 100 acres,
and maybe two aspects too
Yep.
to what you're saying. So like cash flowing along the way, and then
Yep.
also profitability at exit. If
at
there
the
is
exit.
one.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you take 100 acres of tillable at $75 an acre, that's $7,500 a year. I mean, if you're mortgaging that,
And if you're asking a farmer to leave at 1 acre,
Yeah.
get rid of a quarter of that.
Yeah. So all of a sudden you start to look at the ability to make money. For me, at least, a lot of my thinking is kind of down the road, 3 years, 4 years, and selling it with the appreciation and hopefully some improvements done. But recently kind of tripped into timber stuff, which, I've always thought about the timber aspect, but I'm naive to it, right? I have no idea, what that's a pretty big white oak. I don't know.
That's a tree.
Yeah, that's a tree. It's probably worth something. And so, I'd bought, I guess it would have been my second property, last year. This is the one that I'm refinancing. And, I wanted to do some cuts anyways from a whitetail habitat standpoint, right? I just wanted to have it thicker, have some more browse and stuff. So I had a timber guy come out recently, and we'll get deeper into this as the podcast goes on down the road. But, he walked this property with me, and he's like, man, there's significant, there's over $100,000 in a select cut on this property. And, transparently, I bought the property for $370. And so, I mean, that's a substantial amount of timber on that property from a select cut to come off, and again, we talk about down payments and money out, like all of a sudden, my down payment's back in my pocket.
Well, and that's one of the unrealized elements of value. Not that people aren't aware of timber value, but like your seller clearly didn't know.
Yeah. There wasn't a cruise done. And I mean, you got to find the right guy, and it's not easy to just call somebody and say, hey, come look at this. Like, there's a process there, but it at least in the timber side of things, or the woodland side of things, like that is the quickest way to get your money back from a down payment side.
And the beauty is, like, you live in a recreational area, like in Southern Ohio there. Personally, my feeling on it is like you could essentially clear cut that thing, take every, and from a deer hunting recreational standpoint, it's only going to get better.
Yeah.
And so like you kind of have the best of both worlds, take the value out of your timber.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you necessarily have to clear cut it. I mean, a selective harvest is give you more than what
I've got
you want.
4 areas I'm clear cutting, but
it's only going to make the marketability of that property from a recreational standpoint
Sure.
better down the road. Because of the habitat that now exists, because of the deer that you'll inevitably get pictures of and
kill. Better access to the property.
That's a win-win.
Yeah. I mean, and so when people keep asking, they're like, oh, I want to find a deal. Like, it was a super competitive purchase on that property. And I looked at timber as one aspect of the value that could come from it, but I just knew it was going to be a good farm, right? I mean, from where it was and how it's set up, I just knew it was going to be a good hunting farm ultimately. But all of a sudden, if you start to run the numbers on this thing, and to your point, what does this exit look like down the road? Like, I could come out of that farm, 3-4 years from now looking pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And getting myself
and
in
it's
the next
mainly
one.
because of that timber harvest, right?
Well, even in that area, I mean, I'm seeing 5 to 6% appreciation on the land values probably every year. So if you hold that property for 4 years, I mean, and I probably bought it for a little bit cheaper than it was
but
worth.
How much do you have in interest, your interest across those 4 or 5 years, and property taxes?
Yeah.
You're probably about breaking even, right?
Well, it's probably a little bit more still on the appreciation side, because I do have a lower interest rate on that one.
Yeah.
So
those are the two big ones, though, that people don't quite necessarily, yes, land's always appreciating, but in the meantime, you got to pay property tax and you have to pay interest on your payments. And so those add up to a cost over the life that you own the property. And so when you sell it, you have to profit more than that, and that's actually what your profit is at the end of the day.
And I don't know what the exact numbers are, but let's say it's worth $400,000 and it's appreciating at 5%, right? Versus my interest and taxes in that property are probably $14,000 a year, $13,000 a year, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would assume it's appreciating faster than it is those costs are.
Yeah.
But again, that timber coming out is obviously a huge one, and then any improvements. I mean, that's one, Jeff, that I think that Whitetail's probably done the best with that. It's hard to lay a finger on is like, okay, if I do this cut and I improve that, and maybe I add food plots, maybe I put a few hunting, like all of a sudden you've improved the property on top of what I would say the average appreciation is through the years too.
Substantially.
Yeah, and most people, I don't mean this in a negative way, but they lack vision of what something can be, right? So
Yeah.
if you approach something as, man, this is like a blank slate, a blank canvas. If I can improve it, right, I can put a road system in, I can do a select cut here, I can put some blinds, I can add a food plot, and you look at, what is my exit strategy here? Is this a property that I can split? Is this a property that can be divided? And I think a lot of people think I gotta buy 80 acres when, I always look at it as kind of a stepping stone process. I mean, buy what you can afford, right? I mean, if it's 10 acres, if it's 15, if it's 20, and you have, to your point, you have a strategy, right? You buy what you can afford, and you look down and you say, okay, can I split something? What's the appreciation going to be? I think there's a lot that goes into it that, again, people don't think through a lot of that because they just don't know. And so, finding a great agent, finding somebody that can help you with that vision, it can be the difference between pulling the trigger on something or not.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
find a finance guy too. Somebody that understands, land as an asset that can help you compare, like, the appreciation of your property versus the expenses that you're looking at. We've had his name is Nick Skalma. I'm always mispronouncing his last name.
Skalma.
Nick Skalma is a good friend of ours. Works with both Jeremy and I on some of our finance.
Yeah, Edward Jones guy from Wisconsin.
Yeah. We've had him on this I Bought a Farm podcast a few times, and like, dude, what a relief it is for, like, frankly, a non-numbers guy. Jeremy's my numbers guy in most cases, but like I can kind of, I'm the vision guy, right? Like I'm the passion guy. I can kind of like, I can go to Nick and I can also go to Jeremy, right, as my partner here, and say, dude, here's what I've got. Like, I want to buy this piece of property. Here's what I have for a down payment. Like, what do we think here?
Yeah.
And somebody like Nick can really help you break down. It doesn't have to be an unknown. It can kind of be a black and white of like, here's what you're looking at in payments. Here's what we can expect, for this thing to be worth at X time from now. Make the decision.
Nick was the first guy I called on the timber side because the first thing he made sure of, which I knew, but I hadn't known for that long, is get a timber tax basis, right? So that essentially I'm going to get a timber tax basis. Let's say there's 200,000 in timber. If I take 100 off, right, there's no tax on that side.
What a huge thing to know, dude. I've got a piece of property for sale right now, like in Clinton, Pennsylvania, that has $84,000 worth of timber on it. And
ready to be harvested,
ready to go. That's 18 inches and up, DBH. And, so I mean, what a thing to know, like, out of the gate. It's like, dude, half of my down payment's going to be covered, like, within the first, 6 months, or as long as it takes to cover that.
And avoiding capital gain, because if you don't do that tax basis, you're going to be subject to capital gains. They're going to hit you on that from the income side. So yeah, Nick was my first call. It was like, hey, as soon as I get these numbers, I've got this, like, what should I do? Should I pay down some of these farms? Should I hold that and invest in? Should I be looking for something else? It's some of it's just, can somebody support my gut instincts on some of these things, to have that discussion point with. And I think a lot of us as agents, because we live it personally too, like, we're not going to be your financial advisor, but, we're there to at least provide you with the facts that we know on certain things like that side. Hey, there's $84,000 worth of timber here that's ready to be cut. You get a timber tax basis when you buy this thing. That's getting your down payment right back on this farm.
Yeah, that's right. That's
exactly right. I think it's a big. Those are the pieces that I think. The more that there's information out there, it's one of the reasons we kind of started this I Bought a Farm thing, was to be transparent with our own kind of personal journeys and stuff, from an agent side, from a personal investment side and hunting side. But I think that as people start to listen to this, the goal is to make everybody feel more comfortable about this move. It's, it's no different than buying your first house. I mean, it's a huge investment. It's a big move, and for a lot of cases, because it's not the housing market, right? There's a lot of uncertainties of, well, okay, now that I have this land, like, what if I need to sell it, or what am I going to do to improve it? What do my taxes look like?
There's also way fewer people to, that you can go to, like, compared to like the residential sense. It's like, every lender lends on houses. Every real estate agent sells houses. There aren't as many who are accustomed with, selling land. And so it can be scarier from that regard. It's like, find your people, find your problem solvers.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. I think when you start to get into the land purchasing side of things, I mean, maybe don't buy the first farm you see unless you know it's the right one. But, I do think that, especially where we are here in 2023, I think, to Jeff's point, kind of scaling your expectations around the farm. Like if this is probably, we're guilty of it, right? If you're looking for like that one farm, you're going to find a flaw in basically every piece of land that comes across your desk. You just are, right? Because, if it's the perfect land, it's probably got a price tag that pairs with it, right? It's a turnkey type of thing. And I think for a lot of people, our audience at least listening to this, I mean, a lot of people want to be able to improve stuff and to make it better and to get involved. So, I think that as you kind of look at these properties, take it with a grain of salt. I think, our company does a really good job at laying out those properties on the website and showing the photographs, aerials, everything that goes with it. Frankly, there's a lot of things on places like Zillow and LandWatch that are not.
Yeah.
And I'm probably guilty of going over a couple properties that could be great, but what I see in the details surely don't do the property justice.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I agree. I think that is one of the things that our company does very well is, we put together a great presentation. Our agents do a great job with putting video on, trail camera pictures, just a great overall representation of the property. And I think that's not generally the standard in our industry, right? I mean, so I do believe that we do a great job. Our agents do a great job of promoting a property, getting it out there, putting it in its best foot forward, if you will.
Yeah.
For buyers to see, to appreciate, where it does catch their eye, where they do say, man, I want to pick up the phone and call this agent and find out more, about this property. I think, that is the difference between, kind of what I'd call mediocre service and service beyond the sale, kind of deal.
I mean, for any agents listening to this, if you're going to sell a piece of hunting ground and you're not going to have trail camera pictures, you're missing out. I mean, if you're going to tell me that this is the hunting ground that I need to buy and there's no trail camera or no history paired with it, you kind of short stacked it right there.
They're tough to come by too, man. I mean, a lot of people just said they just don't exist, or it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tough, man. But no, so Jeff, one thing I want to do, and we're kind of coming slim on time. I just want to, you have a major thumb on the pulse of kind of this land market, where it's been and where it's at currently. And I think a lot of people listening to this would love to get your 2 cents on kind of where it's going, right? And we're not going to hold you to it, but where do you see the land market going for anyone that's listening to this and saying, I think I'm ready to get in the game. I want to start looking. What are we going to expect here over the next 6 to 12 months?
So, I'm no economist, I mean, I'll preface by saying that, but, I generally believe just watching this for the last 15, 16, 17 years, I generally believe that the opportunity, the market is still strong, right? I think that when you look at just across the board, that values are still holding strong. A lot of values are still going up. And so there's still land. To me is very it's becoming more of a top of mind thing, right? And here's why I say that is because you talk about when Bill Gates gets talked about owning farmland, and you have all these these polarizing people who are talking about land, and they're talking about food, and they're talking about population growth, and they're talking about all these things. I think it brings to the forefront where a lot of people who never thought about owning land are now thinking about that, right? Just the inflation proof, the insulation factor of saying, okay, everything around me is so volatile. What can I look at that is going to be something that's very stable? And as you just look across that, I just generally believe that land currently has been, will be something that I think is going to be just a safe place to put your money. For me personally, what I love about it is I can enjoy it while I own it. it's appreciating. I can make memories with my family. I can take my little boy. I can, I can walk across it. I can drive by it. It's so ingrained in who I am that it just offers it's just a great opportunity of what I'm looking to put my money in, right? I mean, am I still going to do other things, invest in a 401k, do all those different things? I sure am. I'm not going to let up on the gas on those things, right? I believe in being diversified. I think that's very important. But I can tell you that, I'm going to continue personally. And as I watch these markets develop across the country, talk to our agents across the country, I just believe that the demand is still out there. And I think it's going to be a really, really solid investment for a long time. I generally believe that. So.
Yeah. That was I bought my first piece of ground in 2019. I kind of, I pulled contributions from a Roth IRA out to use as my down payment, right? I didn't have a stash of cash somewhere, right? So, I started I put this money in there and basically it was post-tax money, right? So I pulled the contributions out, right? Left whatever it made in the IRA, used that to buy that. And the biggest thing is this is my cabin in 75 acres in Kentucky. It's been the best thing for my family that we've ever purchased. My kids in the summertime, my kids are down there every other week for, 3-4 days. We're there usually every other weekend. It's a, quick 4.5 hour drive. We hunt down there. We have a boat. We fish down there. I mean, from a tangible investment. And so I bought that in 2019, I think for like 245. And then this past year, I had it reappraised for some work that I did, and it appraised for 288. Right, so it went up $43,000 in value, and I didn't really do a ton of work to the cabin. I didn't do anything to the land. I mean, it's just big hardwoods and stuff. And just in that short amount of time, right, it appreciated up $43,000, and we have used the crap out of it. I mean, we have we've made so many memories, and my wife would kill me if I ever sell that place, right? And so it's one of those things that I think when people start to look or feel a bit of fear or staring the risk in the face, the tangible asset that you are now bringing into your household, into your life, I think is a huge factor that for me immediately wiped away like, oh, this could have been a bad investment.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I said, I grew up on land. I love land. It's just something that's in me. It's emotional to me, and as hunters, I think it's emotional to all of us. I say all the time, like I've only met two kinds of hunters: ones that own land and ones that want to own land. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
So I mean, it's something that I think if everyone aspires to, that man, there's a lot of ways to pull off your dream, right? And I just think I get, like I said, I get emotional talking about it because it means so much to me, and I think that's why we put so much heart and soul into our company, is because helping somebody, whether it's their first piece of property or their 10th piece of property, getting to be a part of that process and help people do that, making lifelong friends, watching people achieve their goals of land ownership. I mean, that is so, and I know I'm representative of you guys and all of our agents. Like you get more joy out of that, and satisfaction out of that. It's not about the dollars and cents of it. It's about, that comes. We always tell our agents, if you're great at your job, if you provide a high level of service to your clients, the money will come, right? But building those relationships and helping people get to that point in their lives, and knowing that you played a significant part in that, is it's really, really meaningful.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's awesome. It. Well, I know Jared and I are extremely proud to be part of this company, and it's been kind of a whirlwind here for a year. I mean, we're just over a year into this thing, and
it's been nuts.
It's so hard to like fathom, where we started at an orientation class, at headquarters, to like what we do on a daily basis now. It's like,
that's right.
It's just hard to
and growing our team. I mean, let alone the relationships that we've built over these past 2 years. And to your point, Jeff, it's like, and the argument could be made for any sales position is like we really are in a people business, and like Jared and I love people, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we love sitting here and chatting with people on podcasts every week, but beyond that, we take that to every meeting that we get to have with seller clients and buyer showings. And so we love getting to build those relationships. And more recently here, we've got even, building our own team.
Yeah, we're bringing on our first buyer's agent that just got approved there, corporate, and going through the paperwork.
That's right. You talked to him the other day, didn't you?
A good friend of ours here locally, very well connected, has a passion for everything that we're talking about here, just like us. So yeah, it's crazy how fast it can go. But again, I think to your point, Jeff, like it's kind of built into us, like this land aspect of things, and the ability to help sellers profit from an asset that they should be very proud in, and connecting that new buyer to something that they're going to enjoy for a long time is it's hard to describe, right? Unless you've kind of done it personally. It's just a hard feeling to describe when that closing happens, and that both parties are very happy with how everything went.
That's right.
Yeah, you can't help almost being like the proud dad in the room, like
Yeah, that's right.
happen.
And it's, and I think you guys have experienced this too, and every agent does. I mean, this is a tough business too. I mean, there's tough days, there's tough deals, and you never stop learning. We always talk about that. All the thousands of deals that have come through our doors. It seems like you learn something every day, right? Very rarely does somebody say, "Hey, I got this going on," and you're like, "Huh, yeah, that's a good one. I haven't heard that one before."
Yeah.
But it does happen, and so. I think that's something that, if people are looking and thinking about getting into this business, man, you have to be resourceful. You have to be willing to learn. You can be incredibly humbled, very, very quickly, in this business. But, at the end of the day, man, the positives and the good, I mean, far outweigh, the bad. I mean, it is, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to do what we do every day. It's really special for sure. So yeah, appreciate you guys. You guys have been a great addition to our team, and you have been in a whirlwind. You guys have done a great job in a short amount of time. So kudos to you fellas. So yeah, you guys have done great.
We just like to run at it, Jeff, and yeah. Well, it's easy.
More coming.
Yeah, we just kind of keep going at it, and to kind of wave the banner. I think for Whitetail is just something. It's who we are. It's who we've been for a long time, and so to be part of that team, I think is just made a lot of sense to us, and feels very natural to us as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We know you're a busy guy, and you got a ball game to get to there. And but again, man, thanks for coming on and really talking to some of these points. I think a lot of our listeners are, they're here for a reason. It's to kind of get that voice of affirmation around making a land purchase, because they want it so bad, but obviously the numbers and cents have to make sense essentially. Yeah. So we appreciate you coming on and really dropping some knowledge in that area.
Well, no, I appreciate you guys. This is a great thing that you guys are doing. Anytime we can educate people and get them interested in buying land and furthering the industry, furthering the sport, the recreation of it, the hunting industry, all that is. I think that's all very, very important. In with everything that's going on today in the world. So yeah, really, really important. So
absolutely. We appreciate it, man.
Thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate you.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for the invite. See you, fellas.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Sweet. Yeah, it's I know it, like we said earlier, it's hard to believe this is only like our 7th. I bought a farm, and I'm glad Jeff got to come on there. I mean, it's a guy kind of at the center of our world in the real estate side and the land side. Jeff sees a lot of different things coming through from a lot of different areas, and so it's cool to get his kind of feedback on a lot of that, and especially kind of where he sees this thing going. And kind of what we believe is like, hey, land they're not making any more of it. And I know it sounds so stupid because we just continue to say it, but it's the truth. And when you have a limited supply like that, it's going to either stay at value or it's going to increase at value.
Well, it's an interesting statement, even though it might be like over repeated is like per our discussion about the markets and like, ever changing interest rates, everything that happens around it is like it might mean something different on any given day or just based on how you're looking at it. Like the perspective on that statement that they're not making any more land really is kind of like the basis of our conversation.
Yes, that's exactly what
It's
it
just,
is.
it's what you do with that.
Well, and it's funny because I say this to my wife all the time, but it's partially true. It's like, okay, let's say, I can make good money on one of my farms right now. If I sell that, what do I do next?
Mhm.
Like, yes, I can invest that in traditional funds, but my goal would be to go and buy another property.
Yeah. Well, the question is, as you're building wealth via assets, is what do you want to do next? Yeah, and to have the
I'd
luxury
want
and the freedom to
land and
make that,
hunt.
to do that is what that's offering.
Yeah. So, I think that what I'm hoping is we'll get into more of these here soon. I think probably the one that's coming up big is we'll really break down this potential timber harvest on my Ohio farm.
Yeah.
Because I really, I still don't know all the facts of it, right? And in terms, they're actually doing a cruise right now, yesterday and today, and so then I'll get a report of basically species and board feet.
So he
On
didn't do
there.
one of those for you initially. He just kind of looked around and
We
gave
walked
you a
around.
ballpark.
Yep. So kind of laid out. I've got 130 acres in southern Ohio. Probably 120 of that is forested. I would say maybe 100 of that is probably going to be up for harvest. There's some just overground brushy areas, although I found some decent walnuts in there. So probably let's say 100 to 110 acres of ground that I reached out because I wanted to do a select harvest. It's big open hardwood. There's not much cover. Yeah, yes, I have acorns in the fall, but I mean, it's not good quality deer hunting area or habitat. And so I reached out for a select harvest for two things. Number one, better deer hunting and habitat. Number two, bring in some money. So we spent about 3 hours walking the property in all of these areas and just kind of eyeballing some of these areas. And in the end, that's we kind of mentioned on the podcast. He basically said, "Hey, there's substantial timber value here, and we kind of did an estimate there of where the dollar figure would be, and it we won't know until this cruise is done, but it seems north of 100,000 in a select cut. I also am doing 4 select what we call pocket clear cuts. So I'm doing I think it's like two 4s and 2 2s or something like that, of which I mean clear cut
Just kind of crazy when you think about it. I mean, how much money do you have into that property?
in terms of
Like your
with
down payment?
So my down payment was 74.
Okay.
Yep.
And you've owned it for how long?
14 months.
What do you pay per month?
Oh, 1,400, 1,500.
So what is
Like
that? 14 times. So what do you got? 25 grand in payments?
Yeah. So so say
Some of
100
which is
grand.
interest, a lot
Yep.
of which is
So
interest.
say 100 grand in
So
that.
you basically made your down payment back, or you're going to with this.
I'll make all my money back basically.
Yeah. So basically, up until this point, like you've owned it for free, and you've gained
Yep.
$100,000 almost in equity to, like we said, roll into the next one.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and just
pretty sweet.
Some of the little improvements we've done to the cabin and some places, and we've enjoyed it. Like Carter shot a buck on it this year.
All those, all those benefits that you're looking for, like, are happening in the meantime.
Well, and the crazy thing is, in that area, I kind of take conservatively 5 or 6% appreciation. The property values have soared in the last year down there. I mean, people are buying property for 3,200, 3,400 an acre. I bought mine at like 27. So I mean, there's a lot of factors going in there. And so I have an exit strategy. That said, like, what happens?
Are you going to sell it to me?
Yeah. Yeah. What happens if I create a really, really good deer hunting property, something that is substantial, then I'm just going to leverage the equity to buy something. I'm not going to sell it. Why would I?
Right.
And again,
well, you wait for somebody to make you an offer you can't refuse.
Exactly. And I'm managing the timber. Like when I say I'm doing this cut, like, I mean, we're cutting most of the stuff that we're targeting is 20 and up on a DBH side. Unless it's in an area where there's a bunch of white oaks, then we'll go down to 16 or 18 probably to cut out some select ones. But it's 20 and up. I mean, 10, 12 years. I mean, it's going to be ready again for another potential cut. Not saying that I will hold it for that, but as I'm looking towards who I'm selling it to for future timber value, it's not like I'm going in and wiping out all the white oaks and stuff in there, right? I mean, we're cutting this based on the habitat side of things, and the future timber revenue as well.
And it should be both.
Yeah, it was what I thought was interesting because I didn't see this when I bought it. I know we've had a couple conversations with people, Jed and Ben Rising, on some stuff, but I saw good timber, and I come from an area where like I don't see good timber. Like my house is not good timber. My Kentucky place is decent, but I mean I haven't even thought about it down there.
Ohio's got it, man.
Yeah, and so when I looked at that and when I bought it, I was like, there's good future timber potential. Here we are 14 months later, and I'm making a significant
Everything's
cut.
potential until you cut it.
Well, yeah, I'm making a significant cut for money. When he cruised it, he used the terms, this may be virgin timber. Like there was no signs of that timber being cut in the last 100 years, basically. Which I didn't see as I walked through it, which is kind of, it's so weird how like what I'm looking at is, where could I put food? Where, how would I hunt this? What is this like? What buck sign here? Right. As he's walking it, he's seeing, man, this timber has probably never been cut. There's a lot of value here. And once you open this up and you create some of these bedding areas, this property is going to be banging for deer hunting.
Yeah.
So it's a cool thing. I will be the first to say, like, I'm usually uber conservative and or like lazy at cutting timber because I didn't grow up with land. So I don't, cutting a tree that's 70 or 80 years old to me is like, whoa, it's like a big thing. But as a hunter, and as this being an investment property, it's like, it makes all the sense in the world to do it. And then the revenue that's coming off of it, all of a sudden, I use the example of if I had 100 acres of tillable, right, on that 130, and I crop leased it for $100 an acre, right, I'd make 10 grand a year. That's essentially what I'm making over 10 years for this one timber cut, probably. Mm-hmm. It's hard to like fathom what that would be because of how much more money that acreage would have cost if it was, all tillable ground.
Yeah.
So it's just people always see things different. I think you made the comment of like, hey, being able to bounce it off other people, where it's you and I or Scalma or whoever.
Well, in that case, I mean, your security's coming from working with a forestry consultant.
Huge.
Without that and working with somebody you trust, it's like, you don't know.
You
can just get a logger in there like, oh yeah, definitely 25 grand in here
at
least.
And to the point, Jed was the one that we brought on and talked about it. And we'll probably have Madison on. That's the forester I'm working with too. 10% is their fee. And they'll be there to check in on the crews every week and everything. About a 4 to 5 week process likely to get all the timber off of it. So yeah, it's a big learning experience, but I think this will be a really exciting one for us to share with everybody because it's firsthand. Like we kind of going into this thing blind. I know your parents had some timber cut off here recently. Yep. Seemed like it's going to make a huge impact on the habitat there. But it's kind of odd how it's set up. Like I have a giant block of timber. Yours is, islands where they're already probably bedding.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the more aggressively you cut, the more that your whatever your substory, your forest floor will be released. And that really is what's benefiting like the deer, especially, but all wildlife. And so like, when Jed cut my parents' place, this past year, it was a fairly selective cut. I don't know like what the minimum DBH was. But honestly, like you can tell you're like, okay, yeah, there's fewer trees here and there's some, cover on the bottom, but not, I mean, it's almost like it's very much still woods.
Yeah.
As opposed to there's been some other areas that have been like essentially clear cut.
Yeah.
And like overnight, or getting into the next growing season. It's like, that's where the bucks are at. And so I think you're doing the right thing by selecting a few places that because of the terrain already set up for natural bedding areas to dump it.
Yeah. I mean, that was the cool aspect of working with this guy is first, he's like, number one, I wanted better access. I never even get to the back of the property from a hunting side. Just can't access. So better access. Those 4 select.
That dude, honestly, that's one. I'm sorry to cut you off. That's one huge overlooked thing. Like the timbering adds is, and you don't have to timber a property to put trails in.
Sure.
But like that's going to be an added benefit. Is if you say, hey, can we access it X, Y, Z? I'd like to be able to access these parts of the property.
Exactly what we're doing,
dude.
We're building it into the contract.
Most of the properties that you and I sell via Whitetail Properties, like, don't necessarily have a designated internal road system, but they have been timbered in some cases, and those roads are what you can use to navigate the property. So that's overlooked a lot.
Yeah, we're building that into the timber contract. Especially, I'm going to have a really nice access road on the east side of my property. So hopefully, playing off of westerly winds to hug my border to get towards the back of the property. Yeah. The 4 cuts that we're making, in my preference, again, thinking of westerly predominant winds are all going to be on leeward ridges, or leeward sides of the ridge. So, you're kind of the artist here, right? And it's not that, you're going to make everything perfect or everything lies perfect, but you're going to be able to orchestrate, where this road system is. You're going to be able to orchestrate these cuts. I'm going to have maybe 2 areas that they're going to do a significant cut to give me kind of, a quarter acre, half acre at the most, kind of kill plots back deeper on my property. So, that plus the money coming off of it and just the overall, select cut that's going to thicken the entire property up. I mean, it will change the property dramatically. So yeah, I mean, I will say the one sacrifice that I, kind of conceded to, and I was all right with it anyways, is, because, timber prices are kind of on the way down, right? They had peaked, they're still high, historically high, but they're kind of, fluctuating down. Is I basically said, do it when you can do it. Meaning if they come in and they want to cut in June, go do it. Cut in June. Anything I planted, corn wise, it's going to get tore up. Oh well, it's just how it's going to work. If they're going to come in October, they might.
Mm-hmm.
But that's to try to secure the best return on my investment. And so you give up, part of your hunting season or disturbance in it.
You do. And dude, ours got timbered in, I think, October.
It was October.
I mean, it was right in it.
Yep.
And truthfully, we didn't really hunt the property
Yep.
that year, but I have no doubt that there were deer there and using it. I mean, they almost come in like, as soon as those tops get dropped and stuff, they start utilizing it like almost right away.
Yeah.
Like, think about all that food, especially if it's in like November, December.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have like designated food plots and stuff, like all that food's now been brought to the ground, and like they will within a week of the timber crew getting out of there, they'll start to use it.
So yeah, we'll keep everybody informed. That'll probably be one of the next I Bought a Farms here is kind of really breaking that down with the cruise show. We've got about 4 weeks after that gets put out to receive bids, to accept a bid, to do a timber contract and stuff. So there's still a process at hand here, but
and the thing you didn't mention is you get paid up front.
Yeah. So yeah, again, had no idea. So transparently, the way it work is I'll get 25% of that as soon as the contract's signed. Of that, 10% will go to my timber guy right away. So of that 25%, 10% of that will go to him. So I get 15. Then before they put a single piece of equipment on the property, they will pay the balance of 75%. Before they put a piece of timber down for anything, I'll be paid in full. And then they're off and running, and everything's marked. You can walk through the property and see what trees are marked and stuff. And again, part of the timber consultant's role is he's down there constantly checking in on the crews, making sure they're not cutting what they're not supposed to cut, making sure they're not tearing stuff up. So yeah, it's a cool experience. First one at it. And so it'll be interesting to see, how it goes. And if all goes well, I should have better deer habitat and more money in my pocket.
There you go.
So we'll see.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, we appreciate Jeff stopping in on the I Bought a Farm podcast, episode 2 for 2023, and we'll catch you next time.
Later.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode of the I Bought a Farm podcast, make sure you check it out every other Thursday night on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and any other place that you might find your favorite podcast.